Ethan and Leela had just moved into their dream house, a quiet suburban home with white picket fences and a perfect lawn. But the first night, strange things began. Whispers in the walls, footsteps when no one was there, and shadows that didn't belong. Ethan thought it was stress. Leela thought it was imagination, but both were wrong. Something else lived in the house, patient, watching, and it didn't want them to leave. By the time the first scratches appeared on the floorboards, they realized too late. The house wasn't just haunted, it was alive. I never thought tonight would feel different. I had walked through the front door countless times, but tonight the air inside was heavier, almost suffocating. It smelled faintly metallic, like rusted blood, and it made the hairs on my arms stand on end. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, just my imagination, but the unease in my stomach refused to fade. I dropped my keys on the counter and flicked on the living room lamp, expecting comfort in its warm glow. The bulb flickered, sputtered, and then steadied, casting shadows that seemed to twitch in the corners of the room. I swallowed hard, telling myself it was only the house settling. But then I noticed the front door. It wasn't fully closed. I could swear I had locked it, double-checked it before leaving, but it now stood slightly ajar. My chest tightened, my pulse hammering against my ribs. I told myself to stay calm, that maybe I had just been careless, but the thought didn't bring relief. My eyes scanned the floor and I saw a tan, unmistakable muddy footprint, wide and heavy, pressed into the polished hardwood. My stomach sank. Someone had been here, inside my home, while I wasn't looking. I froze for a moment, unsure whether to run or investigate. Curiosity battled fear in my chest, and slowly I crept down the hallway, gripping the metal lamp I had grabbed from the living room. Every creak of the floor beneath my feet made me flinch. Every shadow seemed to shift. That's when I heard it, a faint scraping sound from upstairs, like nails dragging across wood. I froze again, my breath catching in my throat. The sound stopped abruptly, and for a moment there was only silence, thick and heavy. My mind raced. A shadow flickered across the hallway, too fast to catch, and I staggered backward, almost dropping the lamp. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. The thought that someone or something was already inside, waiting for me, sent chills down my spine. I ran to the kitchen, locking the door behind me, and tried to reason. Maybe it was a burglar, maybe someone had broken in, but something deep inside me told me it was far worse than that. I remembered the windows. I always kept them closed, locked, but now they were open, wide, letting in the cool night air and shadows that danced unnaturally on the walls. Panic welled inside me. Whoever had come in wasn't just an intruder, they had been here for a while, watching, waiting. My hands shook as I gripped the lamp tighter, trying to muster the courage to peek outside, to call for help, but my phone was across the living room. Reaching it would expose me completely. Then I heard footsteps from above, slow and deliberate, each one heavy with intent. My pulse raced as my mind spun with possibilities. The basement, the attic. Were they moving toward me, or just pacing, enjoying my fear? I forced myself to take a deep breath, to calm the panic clawing at my chest. Slowly, I peeked around the corner. My eyes locked onto the staircase, and at the top stood a figure, tall and impossibly still. It was faceless, pale skin stretched tight across a featureless surface where eyes, nose, and mouth should have been. My limbs froze. It tilted its head slowly, unnaturally, as if studying me. My instincts screamed to flee, but I was rooted to the spot. Then it lifted a hand, pointing at me. My chest felt hollow, my blood cold. I realized it didn't need to move to terrify me, it simply existed, and that alone was wrong, unnatural. I stumbled back, almost tripping over the corner of the rug. My mind tried to rationalize, to tell me it wasn't real, but the wide, empty face of the figure burned itself into my vision. I noticed scratches on the floorboards, dozens of tiny marks, leading from the hallway to the basement. The scratches were fresh, the wood still splintered. A cold wave of understanding hit me. I was being hunted, led somewhere. I backed into the kitchen, my grip on the lamp turning sweaty. The house was alive now. Every creak, every whisper of wind, every shadow seemed purposeful. I could feel eyes on me, unblinking, patient. I knew I should call the police, should leave, but even the thought of moving filled me with terror. This wasn't just a burglary. Someone or something was inside, and it had plans for me. Plans I didn't want to imagine. And then I saw it. One of the shadows in the corner shifted and elongated, stretching unnaturally, curling toward the basement stairs. The faceless figure didn't move, but its presence filled the room, pressing in on me. My heart thudded painfully, my breath shallow. That S when I realized the most horrifying detail. The scratches weren't just marks, they were invitations, leading straight to the basement, to something waiting in the darkness, patient and cruel. I didn't sleep that night, though I tried. I kept imagining the faceless figure, standing silently at the top of the stairs, pointing at me with that impossibly blank hand. Every creak in the house made me jump. Every shadow seemed to shift when I looked away, like it had a life of its own. My stomach churned as I realized that the house I thought I knew so well was no longer mine. Something had taken over, something patient and cruel. I forced myself to stay in the kitchen, gripping the lamp so tightly my knuckles turned white, trying to convince myself to wait until morning. But morning didn't bring relief. The dim light that filtered through the blinds made the house feel even more oppressive, like it was pressing down on me. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't stay trapped forever, listening to the endless silence and the occasional scrape of claws or whatever had been in the walls last night. Every instinct told me the basement was the key. I hated myself for thinking that. Part of me screamed to run, to leave, but the other part, some dark, curious part, wanted to see what was there. I approached the basement door slowly. My fingers shook as I turned the knob. The air that rushed out hit me immediately, damp, cold, and heavy with decay. I had never noticed how musty the basement always smelled, but now it was overpowering, and I gagged slightly. I flicked the light on, the bulb flickering before steadying, revealing the room below. My eyes widened in horror. Something had changed. The basement was no longer empty. A pile of objects in the corner caught my attention, though I couldn't make out exactly what they were. I stepped closer, my feet scraping something hard on the floor. My stomach twisted and I dropped the lamp slightly, gasping. It was a human finger, severed, lying there as though it had been placed deliberately. I stared at it, bile rising in my throat. The pale skin, the yellowed nailet, was real. I knew it was real. I wanted to turn and run, but my curiosity chained me to the spot. The pile in the corner shifted slightly. I held my breath, straining to see through the dim light. Slowly, horrifyingly, I realized the pile wasn't just junk. There were dozens of fingers scattered across the floorboards, arranged in a grotesque circle, each pointing toward the center. Dried blood stained the wood. My hands trembled and the lamp shook as I gripped it tighter. The thought that someone or something had spent hours arranging this filled me with a cold, creeping dread. Then I heard it. A soft, deliberate noise from above. I whipped my head around. The basement stairs were empty, but I could feel it watching me. I could feel its presence pressing down from the ceiling. Suffocating. Overwhelming. My chest tightened as my mind tried to make sense of it. The faceless figure wasn't moving. It didn't need to. The house itself was alive now, feeding on my fear, and it could see me everywhere. I stumbled backward, almost falling into the pile of fingers. The shadows in the corners of the basement stretched unnaturally, pooling around the edges, thick and heavy. I realized then that the figure had been pacing above me. The scraping had started again, slow and methodical, following a pattern I couldn't understand. Every step made me flinch, as if the sound itself could crush me. I ran, blindly, back up the stairs, slamming the basement door shut behind me. My heart pounded violently in my chest, and I pressed my back against the door, trying to slow my breathing. I thought I was safe, but then I noticed the scratches on the floorboards leading to the kitchen. They weren't random. They formed a path, an invitation. Every mark seemed to thrum with a malicious intelligence, like the house was taunting me. I barricaded myself in the kitchen, shoving the chairs against the door, but the scratching didn't stop. It grew louder, closer, as if something was moving beneath the floor, directly under me. I pressed my ear to the wood, my heart in my throat, and realized with growing terror that it was deliberate. It wasn't just walking, it was hunting, pacing, waiting for the perfect moment. Then I saw movement in the corner of my eye. The faceless figure was there again, emerging from the shadow near the stairs. Its head tilted unnaturally, impossibly, and its blank face seemed to study me, piercing me with an unspoken threat. I gripped the lamp as if it were my lifeline. My mind raced, trying to figure out what to do next. The basement, the shadows, the scratches, they were all connected. I felt it in my bones. And then, the most chilling thought hit me. The house itself had become part of it. Every shadow, every scratch, every cold draft was orchestrated. It was alive and it was patient, waiting. And the basement. The basement wasn't just a room, it was a trap. Something waited down there, something I would be unable to escape if I ever descended. I sank to the floor, trembling, the lamp clutched against my chest. The scratching beneath the floorboards continued, a slow, relentless rhythm. I could feel it echoing through the entire house, through every wall, every shadow. The faceless figure didn't move, just watched, pointing its hand in that silent, unnatural way. My mind raced, and then I noticed a new detail, tiny, fresh scratches forming a circle around my feet. The house wasn't just haunted, it was alive, and it had me in sleep. I couldn't. The events of the previous night had left me trembling, every nerve on edge. The faceless figure, the basement, the scratches, they haunted every corner of my mind. I had barricaded myself in the kitchen, trying to convince myself I was safe, but the house didn't let me rest. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind outside, every flicker of shadow across the walls made my heart pound as if it would burst from my chest. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, but deep down I knew better. Something in the house had changed, and it was watching me, learning me. Morning came, though it brought no relief. The sunlight filtering through the blinds was weak, as if filtered through some unnatural haze. I needed to move, to find a way out, but every instinct screamed at me that leaving was impossible. I crept through the hallway, my lamp clutched tightly, and immediately noticed that the walls had changed. Deep gouges, claw marks, streaked the plaster, winding across the surfaces like veins. They hadn't been there before. The house was leaving messages for me, reminders that it was aware, patient, and cruel. I decided to check the living room, hoping for some way to escape. But what I found made my stomach twist. The front door was firmly shut now, every window sealed as if by an invisible force. Tiny handprints crawled across the glass, wet and raw-looking, some pressed from the inside, some from the outside, forming patterns that made no sense. It was as though something had been walking along the walls, observing, testing me. I staggered back, my mind struggling to comprehend what I was seeing. The house wasn't just haunted, it was alive, and it was playing with me. I remembered the basement. Despite the terror it inspired, it seemed to hold answers. I knew that what was down there had been waiting, patient, for me to find it. My hand shook violently as I opened the basement door, the cold, damp air washing over me. I descended slowly, every step feeling heavier than the last, the shadows in the corners thickening unnaturally. The pile of fingers from last night was gone, replaced with something new, something even more horrifying. A chair sat in the center of the room, facing the far wall, empty but somehow alive with menace. The shadows around it pooled, shifting, as though the darkness itself was moving. And then I saw it, a mirror propped against the wall. At first it reflected nothing unusual, but as I stared, my blood ran cold. My reflection wasn't in the glass. Instead, the faceless figure sat in the chair, its blank, featureless face turned toward me. I stumbled back, gripping the lamp tighter, my mind screaming in terror. I realized then that it didn't need to move to terrify me. The house itself had become an extension of it. Every shadow, every creak, every chill of air was orchestrated. My body was trapped, my mind trapped, and the figure could see me everywhere. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My voice had been stolen, silenced by the house's cruel design. I turned my gaze from the mirror, trying to find another exit, and froze again. On the floor, half hidden in the shadows, was a human eye. It blinked slowly up at me, alive, desperate, and pleading. It was not mine. I had no idea whose it was, but I knew one thing with terrifying clarity. The house had been collecting, hoarding, feeding. Every object, every body part, every shadow, all of it, was part of some larger, twisted design I couldn't yet understand. The whispering began then, soft at first, coming from the corners, from the walls themselves. The voice was hollow, echoing unnaturally, and although it sounded human, it was distorted, layered, impossible to locate. My head spun as I tried to pinpoint its origin, but the sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was speaking to someone or something inside the house, and I was the unwelcome witness to their plan. I backed toward the basement stairs, desperate to leave, but the shadows shifted in response, forming shapes that mirrored my every move. The faceless figure didn't rise from the chair, but I could feel its attention, its intent. I was being studied, examined, probed. My mind screamed at me to run, to flee, but I knew it would follow me. The house would never let me leave. I stumbled, almost tripping over a loose floorboard, and something cold and wet brushed against my ankle. I looked down and saw more fingers, scattered across the wood, pointing toward the stairs. The house had set a path for me, guiding me toward its dark heart. Panic surged. I wanted to scream, but no sound escaped. I wanted to run, but my legs refused. I was trapped in a nightmare that had become reality. The shadows twisted, the whispering grew louder. The faceless figure watched, and I realized with a chilling certainty that there was no escape. The house had claimed me, and whatever was waiting in the basement was patient, and it would not be denied. The hours blurred into an endless stretch of fear. I didn't know if it was morning or night, and I didn't care. Every creak, every distant whisper, every faint scrape of claws against the floor sent jolts of panic through me. The faceless figure hadn't left, though it moved with impossible silence. I could feel it watching, studying me as though I were a specimen trapped in its laboratory. I had barricaded myself in my bedroom, shoving furniture against the door, but it didn't matter. The scratching beneath the floorboards continued, methodical, rhythmic, like a heartbeat, counting down some terrible measure of time. I pressed my back against the wall, breathing shallow and uneven, trying to calm the terror clawing at me. The faceless figure wasn't outside my door. It didn't need to be. Its presence had seeped into the walls, into the air, into every shadow. I realized then, with a bone-deep chill, that the house itself had become an extension of it. Every corner, every hallway, every floorboard pulsed with its awareness. I was trapped in a living nightmare, and I had no choice but to move, to confront the horror that waited for me. I knew the attic had always been locked. I had never been allowed up there, and I had never needed to be. But tonight, something was different. The key sat on the floor in my bedroom, small and ordinary, yet somehow glowing with a promise of dread. I didn't want to touch it, didn't want to confront whatever lay beyond the attic door, but I knew instinctively that it held answers. That was the only reason the house had left it there. To lure me, to trap me further, to claim me completely. My hands trembled as I fitted the key into the lock and turned it slowly. The attic door creaked open, revealing a steep, narrow staircase shrouded in shadows. A cold gust of air swept down, carrying the smell of dust and decay, of long-forgotten things. I climbed the steps slowly, every movement deliberate, my heart hammering in my chest. The attic was vast, larger than I remembered. Dust hung thick in the air, and the pale light from the single overhead bulb flickered weakly. The shelves lining the walls were filled with objects I recognized immediately. Photographs, letters, trinkets, everything belonged to me. Things I had lost, things I had thought gone forever, arranged neatly, carefully, like a shrine. And in the center of the attic, crouched over a small book, was the faceless figure. Its movements were deliberate, precise. It wasn't writing random things. It was writing my name, over and over, looping in what looked like dried, congealed blood. My stomach twisted in knots. I froze, unable to move. Its head tilted unnaturally toward me, its blank, featureless face staring in my direction. And then I saw my reflection in a broken mirror leaning against the far wall. At first I thought it was me, but the body slumped there, lifeless, with wide, terrified eyes, was not real, or at least, not fully. I realized with a sickening clarity that the figure was preparing something, a replacement, a copy of me that would soon exist in its twisted collection. Panic surged through me. I wanted to flee, to escape, but the attic felt like a cage, walls closing in with every heartbeat. I stumbled backward, my foot catching on a loose floorboard. Something cold and wet brushed my ankle. I looked down, fingers, more fingers. Not just scattered this time, they were arranged deliberately, pointing toward the trapdoor I had come through. The house was guiding me, leading me toward the center of its nightmare. The whispering began again, louder this time, echoing from the corners of the room. It wasn't coming from the figure, it was coming from the attic itself, from the walls, from the shadows. The voices were layered, overlapping, impossible to distinguish. They weren't whispering to me, they were speaking to each other, plotting, planning, acknowledging my presence like I was a specimen under observation. I backed toward the trapdoor, my mind spinning. The faceless figure remained crouched over the book, writing, not lifting its gaze. Its featureless face seemed to pulse, somehow aware of my fear. The shadows shifted closer, pooling, thickening. I realized with chilling certainty that the figure didn't need to leave its perch to control the house. Every shadow, every creak, every step was under its influence. I was completely trapped. And then I noticed something new. Scratches forming a circle around my feet. Fresh, sharp, deliberate. The house had marked me. I wasn't just a visitor, I was prey. And whatever was waiting in the basement, whatever had been patient, methodical, orchestrating this entire nightmare, would not stop until it had me entirely. I sank to the floor, lamp clutched to my chest, trembling, powerless. The faceless figure kept writing. The house breathed, pulsed, and whispered around me. I realized the horrifying truth. The house wasn't just a place. It was a living, patient predator, and I was trapped inside its heart. I don't know how long I've been here. Hours, days. Time has no meaning in this house anymore. The shadows stretch endlessly, crawling along walls and ceilings as if alive. The whispering never stops. It comes from the floors, the walls, even the air itself. I can feel the faceless figure watching, always watching, though it hasn't moved from the attic since I last saw it. Its presence is everywhere, suffocating, a constant weight pressing into my chest. The lamp in my hands feels like a frail barrier against the darkness, but I know it can't protect me. I tried once to call for help. I thought maybe, somehow, someone outside would hear me. I picked up my phone, dialed emergency services, and screamed, but the phone simply repeated my own voice back to me. There was no dial tone, no connection, only the echo of my fear. Every mirror shows me dead, every shadow twists into something alive, every whisper speaks in a language I almost understand but never quite do. The house has swallowed the world. The house has swallowed me. Last night I saw movement in the attic again. The faceless figure was gone, replaced by a new one, crouched over the book. It wasn't me, though it had my face, my body, my eyes wide with terror. I realized then the truth I had dreaded. The house doesn't just trap people, it copies them, it collects them. It creates versions of them, twisted and fearful, that it uses to perpetuate its terror. The faceless figure wasn't the master. The house was. I wandered through the hallways, desperate to find a safe place. But there is none. The kitchen, once a refuge, has become a trap. The bedroom where I barricaded myself now feels like a cage with walls closing in. The shadows gather in corners, moving with purpose, thickening as I pass. I hear footsteps above me, behind me, and sometimes from below. They echo off the walls, layered and multiplied, impossible to locate. The house is alive in every way I can't comprehend. I return to the basement. I don't know why I went back, except that a part of me needed to see it, to understand it, to confront the horror. The basement door opened icily this time, though I had never touched the lock. The air was thick, damped, filled with the same metallic stench that had greeted me the first night, and the circle of fingers was gone. In its place was a small figure crouched in the center, scribbling frantically in the book. I could barely see it in the dim light, but I recognized the shape. It was me. The faceless figure had returned, standing silently at the top of the stairs this time. Its head tilted unnaturally as it studied me. I realized I wasn't the only one trapped in this house. The figure at the top of the stairs, the one in the attic, the copy in the basement, they were all watching, waiting, judging, learning. The house had multiplied its horror, spreading it across the rooms, across versions of myself I couldn't distinguish from reality. A low whisper drew my gaze downward. The floorboards shifted beneath me, and I saw another eye, wide and pleading, blinking up at me from the darkness. It wasn't my eye. Not mine. Whoever or whatever had come before me had left pieces of themselves behind. Tokens, markers, remnants of fear. The house had stored them, arranged them, using them to guide me toward the center of its plan. My chest tightened as I realized the full scope. The house doesn't just trap, it transforms, it consumes, and it releases only echoes of the living into a nightmare of its own creation. I backed against the basement wall, every muscle trembling. I thought of escape, but the house has no doors, no windows, no exits. Even if I ran, it would follow me. The shadows moved closer, pulsing with intent, whispering my name. The lamp slipped from my hands and clattered to the floor, the light flickering out, leaving me in darkness deeper than anything I had ever known. I can hear the front door opening now, footsteps. Someone new, curious, unsuspecting, smiling. The house waits patiently, hungrily. I know what is coming. They will follow the path, the scratches, the whispers, and they will never leave. The house will collect them, copy them, and place them in its twisted catalogue, just as it has me. I press myself against the wall, listening, trembling, knowing the truth. The faceless figure isn't the monster. The house is patient, methodical, eternal. And now I am nothing but an observer, a prisoner, waiting for the next cycle to begin. Somewhere deep in the walls, I can feel it. The house is watching me too, always waiting, and I know it will never stop. The footsteps draw closer, and I realize with a shivering certainty that this is far from over.